As many of you know, the American Alpine Institute's core mountain, the mountain that is our home base, is Mount Baker, or Koma Kulshan. The word Kulshan is a Lummi word that means that the summit of the peak has been damaged or blown off by an explosion or even shot off through the end. The origin story of Mount Baker, as told by some native legends, is that Kulshan was a fair youth, and he had two wives, Dahawat and Wahakwe. Wahakwe wins over her husband, and Dahakwe becomes jealous. Dahawat was so beautiful that she figured she'd play a little game and kind of trick Kulshan into desiring her more. So she told her husband that if things didn't change, she was out of there. She was going to leave. She was going to take all her possessions and go. Kulshan did not like this ultimatum. So he said, all right, you can go. And you can go as far as you want. And I'm not going to stop you. Dahawat was shocked. And, so she was like, all right, well, I'm going to make it happen. And he'll see that he really needs me. And we know how this usually goes in modern relationships. Anyway, so she goes. And even though she had 3 kids with Kulshan, and even though they were, upset that she was going to leave and cried and told her to stay, she still went. She goes down the valley, keeping Kulshan in sight as long as possible, just to give him as much time as possible to call her back. As Dahawat goes down the valley, she kind of starts to think about how this is playing out. He's not calling her back. And so she continually looks back over her shoulder, waiting for her husband to call her back, waiting, hoping that he's going to call her back. She's gone so far that she has to climb up every hill and look back to try to see him, to see if he wants her back. Every single little hill as she goes up a little higher to see if he'll call her back. Sometimes on top of these hills, she's gone so high that she's like standing on rocks, she's standing on her tiptoes, she's doing whatever she can to see, just hoping that there's something over there that's going to tell her that he wants her to come home. Finally, she finds the highest point possible, and she decides to make camp, looking back, waiting, and hoping that he's going to call her back, looking as closely as she can. And so finally at Dahawat's camp, looking back to Kulshan, waiting for him to call her back, Dahawat too became a mountain. Mount Rainier. Mount Baker is a stratovolcano that is approximately 400,000 years old, or young if you think of it that way. The Earth is nearly 4 billion years old. The first native inhabitants of the area climbed up to the glacier's peripheries to search for mountain goats. The mountain goat hair was really good for clothing, and of course the meat was good too. This was an important thing throughout human history in the Pacific Northwest. Mountain goats are valued. Though there were many unsuccessful explorations of Mount Baker, from a climbing perspective, it was the Englishman Edward T. Coleman who really first made the real successful forays onto the mountain. There were a handful of people who tried some ways, but found that the routes that they were looking at were just too technical. Coleman made several attempts to climb the mountain, but he did so with 2 native guides. They were Talum and Squawk. And of course, all 3 of these individuals were so important to the mountain's history that we have the Coleman-Deming route. That's the Coleman route, Coleman Glacier, after Edward T. Coleman. The Deming Glacier is right over here. Coleman-Deming is the standard route on the mountain. And we have the Squawk and Talum glaciers. The Squawk is a variation to the Easton. Coleman-Deming is a standard route. Easton is the other really standard route. Talum, not that many people climb, but he's of course memorialized on the mountain. I should note, of course, that the Easton Glacier, the variation of the Squawk, was named after Charles Finley Easton, who was the head of the Mount Baker Club and really was involved in a lot of the research about the mountain. But let's get back to Squawk and Talum. Coleman's first attempt was unsuccessful. He went up the Skagit River and encountered, this was without Squak and Talon, went up the Skagit River and encountered some unfriendly natives. It turns out some of the researchers believe that they were actually not local and that they were from Thompson River in Canada, and that they were looking to get on Mount Baker to find goats of their own. Coleman would make a couple of more attempts going up the Nooksack River and then Glacier Creek, ultimately finding their way up to a camp. And of course, Squak and Talon were involved in finding the way, often scouting ahead, sometimes hunting marmots for the team. But Squak and Talon didn't really go beyond the snow line. It's likely that they had some kind of knowledge of the crevasse hazard, but there were also some stories, some native stories about the mountain. There's a legend that Kulshan got really mad one time and a large part of the mountain fell off and filled the streams with dead fish and brown water. And then Kulshan never got mad again, but there's a possibility that this legend led Squak and Talon not to want to go too high on the mountain. Finally, in 1868, Coleman and two companions would stand on the summit, but he would have never got there without Squak and Talon.